Hello.
Good evening.
Hello, it's Tony Simpson joining by phone.
Hi, Tony. Can I ask, it's Liz Richardson from the council. Can I ask you to pop yourself on mute, perhaps?
On mute? Yes, I can.
Thank you.
Hi, Tony. It's Mary.
He's just popped himself on mute like I asked him to, Mary. All right. Okay, well, it's 6:31. We might commence. Good evening, everybody, and thank you so much for taking the time to join us this evening. My name is Liz Richardson, and I'm the General Manager at Hawkesbury City Council. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land, the Darug and Darkinjung people, show our respects to elders past, present and future, and may I also extend that respect to any Aboriginal people here with us here today. I'd like to take this opportunity to acknowledge and thank all of the crews and volunteers initially from the New South Wales Rural Fire Service, New South Wales State Emergency Service, New South Wales Fire and Rescue, New South Wales Police and the Australian Defence Force, of course, who have worked side by side with council's teams in the Macdonald Valley and right across the LGA, initially keeping our residents and our community safe, and since certainly throughout the immense cleanup and recovery efforts that have commenced over the last week or so. I will just pass over short right now to Mayor Patrick Connolly to say a few words, please.
Yeah, thanks, Liz. Hi, everybody. Look, obviously, we've all been through disaster after disaster in the Hawkesbury, and I know that your community has been one of, if not the worst hit. So first of all, I want to we appreciate you taking the time to be here tonight to continue to communicate with us. Tonight, the idea is that our staff are going to take you through what we're doing to address the damage that's been caused to our infrastructure and how council intends to approach the challenges that we now have in that regard. Tonight, myself and there's a few other councillors here as well. We're here just to listen to what you have to say, make sure we're doing our best by you. And I just want to say we will see this through. We will get access and other services restored as soon as we can. And yeah, we're just here to listen tonight. So feel free to let us know what we need to know. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Patrick. I certainly recognise that over the last 5 months have certainly been a particularly difficult time for many of you and the community more broadly. And there's been a huge impact on your day-to-day lives. For many of you, this is the 5th flood in 3 years you've had to deal with. And these July 2022 floods have peaked close to 14 metres at Windsor, but the peak in parts of the Macdonald Valley represented something approaching much closer to a 1 in 100 year event, and was some 2 metres higher than had been experienced in March. And this is obviously, much higher and has contributed to a much greater level of damage and destruction to your community. Complicating matters is that this flood caused considerable damage and further damage to vital roads that connect our Macdonald Valley and Colo communities that had already been damaged by the previous flood events. And this is especially true for Settlers Road and the Thomas James Bridge. This meeting really this evening is an opportunity for us to come together to develop the best solution for your community, and hopefully this meeting will then provide us further opportunity to continue to work together moving forward as we progress through our recovery phases. Tonight with us, we've got a number of council staff with us on the call, but in particular Council's Director of Infrastructure Services, Will Barton, and I'm led to believe there may well be some representatives from Central Coast Council as well. We're going to be discussing what damage has been caused and what works the Council is proposing to do in the short term to restore access, and the long-term plans for rehabilitating Settlers Road and Thomas James Bridge. We're also going to address some of the important issues that have been raised with us, particularly over the last couple of weeks, and then we're going to open it up for your questions. We do have with us joining this evening, I think, Mark Andrews and Kim Cowper representing Susan Templeman, the federal member for Macquarie. And I also have a number of councillors. Obviously, you've heard from Councillor Connolly, have Councillor Schiefer, Councillor Lyons Bucket, Councillor Shane Jurek, Councillor Amanda Kotlash, Councillor Jill Reardon, Councillor Danielle Wheeler, and Councillor Nathan Zampronio. So before I hand over to Will, just a few house rules. And we've got them just there on the slide. If you can just please mute yourself while the presenters are speaking, purely just so we've got some good audio. And I would ask that you hold all the questions till the end of the question and answer session, so that we've just got an opportunity to be able to answer some of those questions potentially through our presentation. And we just encourage you to remain respectful during the meeting. I would also like to point out that this evening's meeting is being recorded, principally for those members of your community that can't join us tonight. And then what we're going to do is make this presentation available on our website sometime late tomorrow. So with all of that in mind, I'm now going to pass over to Will Barton, and he'll begin proceedings. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Liz, and good evening, everybody. So I thought that the way we would structure this is to talk very quickly generally about the Macdonald Valley, the scale of the flood, particularly the debris, the roads, and the parks, and then have a bit of a closer look at the firstly the village of Sun Albans, and then the community of down along Walmsley Road and Settlers Road, particularly where they're located between the two landslides, or the Thomas James Bridge and the landslide. So, as Liz said, the early analysis suggests that it was a flood down the Macdonald Valley, in some locations at least, approaching a 1 in 100-year event. And exceeded the March 2022 flood by close to 2 metres. In talking with a few locals in St Albans last week, certainly their impression was that it's the highest flood that they had seen in that time. Whereas the March event, in terms of the broader LGA, had a much greater focus on the Colo River. Unfortunately, on this occasion, the event focused very much on the Macdonald, and that's where we're seeing the most damage generally across the city. The community have been quite, I won't say vocal, but have asked some very relevant questions, particularly around the early closure of the gate on the Thomas James Bridge. And that's something that I wanted to address first and foremost, is that the decision was made by me on that Friday afternoon, with the benefit of briefings from the Bureau of Meteorology and the SES, along with specialist advice from our geotechnical engineer, that any rain, and particularly the rain that was forecast to fall over the Friday night, was likely to result in a catastrophic failure of the bridge. And so in balancing the access for the community against the safety of both workers and the public, that decision was made to preemptively close the gate. In terms of debris and the cleanup, so since the floodwaters started to recede and we were able to regain access, we've seen over 140 kilometres of our road network has so far been inspected across the LGA, and over 100 locations. We've so far recorded in excess of 200 asset failures, which range from road shoulders and minor pavement failures through to potholes, drainage structures, landslides, silt and debris and vegetation buildup. Since the 7th of July, when waters began to recede, we've had crews working 7 days a week across various locations, and I have to say that the focus has been on the Macdonald Valley, where once we were able to establish access, we actually pulled crews off Freeman's Reach Road to begin to clean up St Albans Road and get access in. In terms of the debris, I've flown the full Macdonald Valley right up to its headwaters, and it's beyond words the amount of debris that's been washed down and is stuck on various bridges and other infrastructure. So far, we've cleaned in excess of 1,000 tonne of predominantly sand and mud out of St Albans and the surrounding area, which has been stockpiled and will be removed in due course. And we've had over 350 cubic metres of green waste, which has come down the river, removed as well. In terms of our approach with roads, we are taking a similar approach as we did for the last flood event, which is technically a 2-stage approach, although with the level of debris, it's actually 3-stage. So that's 3 stages. So the first stage is to get access. So that's to clear off the silt and the mud, make it safe for my engineers to get up into those roads and start inspecting them. As they're inspecting the damage, they're feeding information back to our crews who do an initial make safe repairs. And the good example of that, which I'll come to in a moment, is the landslide on Settlers Road. Once we've got the make safe repairs, and I should add, if that's only taken, or that step is taken where it's not possible to do the permanent reconstruction immediately. But after those make safe repairs, we step in and do the permanent reconstruction. Now that may be some weeks, some months, and for some parts of the city, it's going to be over 12 months before we come back to do those permanent repairs. Those temporary repairs aren't designed to last for very long. They really are just to get safe access for the public. There's been a lot of questions raised around the funding and whether we will get funding for this. The state and the federal government have both been very proactive in declaring, I think within a few days of the flood event occurring. In fact, it was peaking, I remember now. As the peak passed through Windsor, the event was declared a natural disaster, which opened up a whole lot of funding opportunities. In terms of the park, unfortunately, and a great shame, we only opened the Sun Albans Park, which was funded out of the bushfire recovery funding a few weeks before this flood event. Thankfully, it looks like there is no structural damage to the vast majority of the park, with only one freestanding panel which has been bent over, and we've already got arrangements underway to repair that once the contractors are available. The flood also damaged a large section of rubber softfall, and given the extent of damage and with a view to a more resilient final product, we won't be replacing that softfall. We'll instead replace it with, that rubber softfall. We'll instead be replacing it with pine bark softfall, which is both much more readily available and much easier and faster to replace. So to move on to St Albans in more detail, to discuss the initial cleanup, getting supplies in and out roads and bridges. In terms of the initial cleanup, with the support of the ADF, RFS, SES, and our own crews and contractors, the cleanup of St Albans commenced when we restored road access on the 11th of July. The initial focus remains very much on debris removal from the village and making safe or fencing off and isolating any dangerous structures such as the public toilets adjoining the park. I think we've managed to get in and remove the damaged picnic shelters. The tables and chairs are still sound, and they've been cleaned up. That bulk cleanup at St Albans we're anticipating is approaching, or we'll wrap up operations there by the end of this week. And our focus will shift into the Upper Macdonald Road, where, as you can see in that top right, we've got at least 3 bridges with significant debris loading, erosion of the abutments, and we need to be able to get in and have a look at the pylons to make sure that they're structurally sound. Flood waste curbside cleanup has begun this week, or is beginning this week, with our state partner agencies, particularly Public Works. The allocation of skip bins where curbside is impractical, and to address that a little more broadly, generally our approach in partnership with Public Works is to do a curbside flood waste collection. So that is, flood waste from private properties is put out on the curb or the road verge. There aren't too many curbs in St Albans. Put out on the road verge where there's space, and then their machinery and their trucks come through, collect it and remove it. And that methodology has proved to be a much faster and much more efficient methodology through the more populous parts of the LGA. Out of the March event, we were able to move about 4 times more waste in 2/3 of the time. So where there isn't the room, or for any other particular reason around the location, there is an ability for residents to request a skip bin, and Public Works will make that assessment and arrange for the delivery of those skip bins. What is really important is that if you have not already, is to register with council for that flood waste curbside cleanup or the bin allocation. This is in some respects, it's a numbers game, and while ever we have that demand, we will keep a lot of our state support. When the numbers start to dry up, that's when they'll begin to make an assessment of whether they continue their operations here or whether they move out and hand that operation over to us. So that's and I'll repeat that a few times tonight. It's really important that those registrations come through. Moving on to the supplies. So first and foremost, the priority has been to get drinking water in. With the contamination of water and the impact of the flooding, loss of electricity, etc. We got 3 pallets of drinking water in quite quickly. And now the stage we're at, subject to the weight limit on the bridge, which I'll come to in a moment, there should not be any impediment to water carters accessing St Albans to begin the process of flushing out any contaminated water tanks and restocking water. Bottled water will continue to be provided for residents until they've been able to get that water supply from the water carters back into the village and those water tanks topped up. We've been able to secure and provide 4 portable toilets for the park for community use. There's a lot of the on-site effluent treatment systems have been filled or in some way compromised, like our septic tanks down at the park. And these are going to be maintained in place for the coming weeks. There's certainly no push to get rid of them. They'll be there as long as they need to. Initially, we placed some bins out in the public for public use until we could get a curbside collection back in place. That garbage collection for the village of St Albans, I understand the recycling collection occurred, I think it was on Monday, and the curbside collection of the red bins has also recommenced or is imminently recommencing. In terms of roads and road access, so the maintenance of Wheelbarrow Ridge Track, which is one of the key routes in, is scheduled. I appreciate that for this community, the Wheelbarrow Ridge Track isn't one that has necessarily come up in the past, but it is with Greens Road out of action because of the damage there. It is one of the key access routes into the Macdonald Valley. It's a fire trail through National Park. There are some very strict controls on and conditions on how we can continue to utilize that track, but we've got that approved with National Parks to maintain it. The clearing of roads and silt and debris continues in St Albans, and as I said, we're focusing now on moving up into the upper and the higher Macdonald, where we've seen and know that there is some considerable sand and sediment deposits on roadways, which is making access extremely difficult. I have to say, when I was up there with our Metropolitan Recovery Coordinator and our local emergency controller last week, the sight of landowners mucking in and digging their way out was incredibly reassuring, a real sign. And I know they took a lot out of that in terms of the resilience of the community, that they were rolling up their sleeves and getting on with the job. Our hope is that we'll be able to meet those community members as we dig our way in, and that will certainly be our focus as we continue up the valley for several weeks to come. The Landslip on Settlers Road, about 10 kilometres north of Wiseman's Ferry, has been a real focus for us. That for me and for my team is of utmost importance, not only for day-to-day access for St Albans and those communities between St Albans and the location of the landslide, but it's also our fastest way of getting access into the Walmsley Road community, and I'll touch on that in the next section. What I am pleased to say is that we'll have that open to a 5-tonne limit noon tomorrow. That photo in the top right is as of about 4 o'clock this afternoon. So the contractors have made some really good progress. They've got some additional tidy up work and a bit more base material to put on, as well as some table drains to cut in to ensure that we don't have any future failures if we get some more rainfall. The bridge at St Albans. So after the March event, we were successful in advocating to Transport, and Transport came to the table. Transport for New South Wales, that is. It's their bridge. They came to the table to raise the weight, the load limit on that bridge. Ordinarily, it's 15 tonnes gross vehicle mass. Back in March, any vehicle, I think the wording was any vehicle required in the recovery was permitted up to a 24-tonne limit. We've widened that out a little bit to be encompassing of any vehicle associated with the recovery or the response of any of those upper Macdonald or lower Macdonald communities can access that upper limit of 24-tonne. Now, there are some very strict conditions, and I understand Transport's in the process of getting these signposted. I'll repeat it here. We'll repeat it on every possibility we can, because that bridge is absolutely vital to maintaining transport links into the Macdonald Valley. So it's a 10km/h speed limit for any vehicle exceeding 15 tonnes. Only one vehicle on the bridge at a time. You cannot brake because it's the braking forces that will cause some damage to it. So no braking and obviously no overtaking. If there's any uncertainty or any hesitation, you can get in touch with us or Transport for New South Wales, and we'll be able to send those conditions around if you want to send them to any contractors, water carters, or any other vehicles that are coming in over that 15-tonne limit. So that's a bit of a very quick run through of the St Albans, or the situation in St Albans. In terms of Walmsley Road, taking the same approach of talking about suppliers, access roads and priority, this is a far trickier and more difficult situation in terms of getting access for supplies and so forth. So drinking water was delivered via pallets. My apologies, I lose track of the days, last week. That is going to continue the supply until we can get suitable access for water carts to come in by whatever means. Now, we're working very closely with Resilience New South Wales and Public Works on a couple of plans to get or to provide access to water carts and also silage trucks to pump out compromised effluent systems, on-site effluent systems. Our hope is that we'll be able to secure and construct the infrastructure necessary for a barge. Now, there are some constraints with that. There are some difficulties that we have to overcome in terms of access and engineering. It's not an issue of funding. The state have indicated that, and the federal government for that matter, through the DRFA, the Disaster Recovery Funding Arrangements, have indicated that the funding will be there to support it. It's literally about, can we get safe access for a large barge that's capable of taking a significant heavy vehicle, something approaching 25 tonnes. We are pretty confident that by the end of this week, we'll have a plan either way for getting those heavier vehicles into Walmsley Road. And wrapping up in that, we are also, or will also be able to address the restoring a regular household red lid bin collection. It'd be great if we can get recycling as well, but I think the priority for everyone is the household red lid bin collection. Those plans are being finalised. It's not dependent on the barge or on getting barge access, but we anticipate that we'll have, again, those plans finished by the end of this week and be operational next week. And certainly as we finalise these plans through our regular communication channels, and now that we've got email addresses, we'll be able to provide some more direct communications in respect to those. There are the portable bins at the park or in the reserve. I think there's about 30. They were emptied today, and they'll be returned empty tomorrow. And similar to St Albans, we've got portable toilet facilities in there, and again, they will be there as long as they need to be. Now, in terms of access, the Thomas James Bridge is open. It has suffered some significantly more damage, particularly on the southern approach, following this most recent event, where we've seen the road embankment just south of the bridge subside, in some places up to 700 millimetres more, so that's almost a metre more than it had in March. We are undertaking our routine monitoring, but we have managed to reopen it to a 5-tonne limit. That was undertaken under the advice of our consulting structural and geotechnical engineers. The triggers that were in place in March remain. So if we get more than 20 millimeters of rain in a 24-hour period, then the bridge will close. And similarly, if our routine monitoring picks up any movement that is in excess of preset or predetermined levels, then that bridge will close. Emergency services have been briefed on the closures, and I understand that they've got their own contingency plans for dealing with any emergency or any need for their presence in the valley. The power in the valley, the power in Walmsley Road has been re-energized. So the 240 volt local network has been re-energized. I'm not 100% sure on the communications from Endeavour Energy. So for the sake of perhaps repeating what they've already put out, if your home or your residence was impacted by flooding and the electricity was cut, then you'll need a level 2 electrician to come in and deem the house safe, and then undertake the physical reconnection of the overhead lines. In terms of our priorities for Walmsley Road, really it's about recovery and getting on as quickly as possible with that curbside flood waste cleanup and the putrescible waste. And then to do all of that, we need the access for the heavy vehicles, which will then of course allow for water carts and silage trucks. Public Works bumped in a couple of small machines late this afternoon, I believe, a posi track and a small excavator to kick off that curbside collection of flood waste. There will be a small fleet of light trucks coming in tomorrow, and they will have to, they will be going out either the Thomas James Bridge or the long way via Sun Albans, and it's going to be a slow process until we can get that heavy vehicle access restored. We really are constrained by the 5-ton limit at both the north and the south ends of Settlers Road. The information that I spoke about in terms of curbside collection of flood waste for St Albans applies here as well in terms of skip bins. The difference here, though, is that skip bins won't be able to be delivered until we have heavy vehicle access through that northern section where the landslide on Settlers Road is. That's really going to be key to get those that flood waste, or the skip bins in and then the flood waste out. Was there anything else? So same message in terms of registration. If there is a need, there is a need for residents to register. So head to our website and register for the curbside collection or the skip bin collection of flood waste. Again, that is really important. That is really, really critical. Now, if there is a need for, and again, we've heard through our recovery centres that there are still some residents who haven't been able to get in and haven't been able to have their premises washed out, despite the broader and more substantive effort of our emergency services having wrapped up their operations. We've got plans in place to continue to support the community in doing the washout of any residents that were missed in that initial push. For that, what I would ask and what we would ask is that you contact council by phone and register with customer service that you need a washout of a house or a premises. We'll coordinate with the local RFS, so the Hills District RFS and the Hawkesbury District RFS. And once we have enough work for a couple of crews, you know, we are respectful of our volunteers' time, and they've been through a lot as well. Once we've got enough work to fill up a couple of crews, then we'll task those crews in to do that washout. Until we get that access restored to the north, we've got, I believe, one heavy pumper or heavy fire truck within Walmsley. Once we get that access restored on Settlers Road, then we'll be able to bring more crews and do more washout as we get those requests. In terms of Settlers Road, so understandably, or I'm sure there's going to be a lot of interest in that, the timing on that, that restoration of Settlers Road. We have initial confirmation from a contractor that they'll be available the week after next to commence the permanent restoration of Settlers Road, utilising the same methodology as the repair from, I think it was the February 2020 flood. So we're pretty confident that that is something that we'll be able to knock over in about 4 to 6 weeks, subject to weather and subject to availability of material as well. I'm hopeful, and we're exploring every opportunity to expedite that, including working night shifts, 7 days a week, bringing in additional contractors if this one can't. That's really our priority, is to focus on Settlers Road. In terms of the Thomas James Bridge, with the exception of the change in monitoring, so we are monitoring it more frequently now, we're continuing on with our design work. So the geotechnical investigation was completed a few weeks ago. They are doing, and I spoke to them this morning, they've got their draft report and they've done all of their testing and all of their analysis. So that will transfer over to the designer, who's already commenced designing a number of options to fix the bridge or the abutments. The final design solution we're aiming for is to have it operating as it did prior to any damage, so without any weight restriction, but also whilst maintaining that heritage value of the bridge, the abutment, and the gateway to that World Heritage Site. That's about the focus of the next steps. In terms of where to from here, so we unfortunately are well versed in having to notify or undertake targeted notification of communities when things change. Through the link that is on the screen there, and that will circulate to this to everyone that's registered tonight, you can register for notifications relating to Settlers Road. It's really important that we get both email and mobile. When we have those closures because of rainfall or because we've detected movement in the formation of the bridge or the abutments, we use those emails and those SMS phone numbers, those mobile numbers, to get notifications out to the community, to notify of those closures as quickly as possible. The SMS is super fast, and generally we've had the greatest success with that, and we understand that it has an enormous impact on communities, on lives, but I can't stress enough that we have to do all that we can to preserve that bridge, because if we push it too far, it will fail, and if it fails, then we've got a just magnitudes of order greater challenge that we have to solve. So I think that's it from me. I think we use the hand system. Raise your hand if you have a question. But thank you for joining tonight.
Thanks very much, Will. We'll now open it up to questions. First one there, Carl Freer, right?
Yeah, thanks, Elizabeth. Yep, that's close enough for me anyway.
I'll take it.
Firstly, appreciate the opportunity and the coordination of tonight's event. Will, could I just try and seek a little bit of clarity on some of the commentary in my, obviously I'm interested in the Upper Macdonald and the Sun Albans region, but my specific questions are very much related around the Walmesley Road, Lower Macdonald section. In terms of those services around water carts and sullage pumps coming in on barges, I like the solution, but you didn't mention any how we go about, do we register? What are the next steps, and what does that look like in terms of, making sure we access those services?
Yeah, look, terrific question, Carl. We first need to be satisfied that we can safely get heavy vehicles into and out of that location on barges. That's the first hurdle that we have to tackle. Shortly, assuming we can get to that point where we can do that safely, then we'll start to communicate about how those private contractors can, in essence, get a schedule or a queue or some sort of system in an orderly way of getting into and out of the area via the barge. So that's I'll be honest, that's a secondary priority for us. The first priority is to actually establish that and do everything we can to get a barge operational, because we can at least get on with the larger cleanup effort. And then while our partner agencies are doing that, my staff can work on the process of getting private contractors in and out.
Okay, so what I've taken from that is solution and scenario one to expedite these rectifying these services is barge. Obviously, if that becomes a problem as you go through that assessment, I'm guessing your default scenario two is back to road access. And that's where I transition my next question to. You referred to the Settlers Road and hopefully having that rectified within the next. Well, actually, I guess one of my questions was I wasn't very clear, and whether I didn't hear or it wasn't communicated around the specific timing of the opening of that road. I heard the 5-ton timing, but I guess I didn't hear any forecasted timing around anything further than 5-ton, because 5-ton is, in all honesty, by the time we drive our car, we load our trailer or try to tow a boat out, we're done.
Yep. No, not at all. So the 5-ton access will be restored at noon, or by about noon tomorrow, and the unrestricted. Now, when I say unrestricted, keep in mind that there's still the restriction at Sun Albans of the 24-ton limit on the bridge. The unrestricted for Settlers Road, I'm anticipating will be 4 to 6 weeks, depending on weather, availability of material. Okay,
so from a Walmsley point of view, we may end up with up to 24-ton with all of the previous criteria we had in March within a 4 to 6 week period. Mm-hmm. I don't blame you for not speaking about timing whatsoever on the coming through the lower end up through the ferry. But I'm going to ask the question anyway. This 5-ton limit around the bridge, and you talked about all of the different activities that are taking place around engineers and around planning, and you said it's not a funding issue at the moment. It sounds like it's very much a logistical issue. How do we, and what really concerned me, I guess, is you really talked about some of these longer term solutions could be 12 months.
Yeah, look, it's that bridge is incredibly complex. Not only is it complex from an engineering perspective, I mean, we've effectively got an 1830 vintage formation up to 7 meters high with hand hewn rocks which are eroding and failing. That in itself is a complex issue to solve, but we have to do it with the constraints and giving due consideration to the heritage impacts as well. Now, up to this point in time, nobody has told me that the heritage is going to prevent any permanent restoration, and I'm not anticipating that. But what it will do is make things complex in the process of restoration. The site itself is also very difficult. We had to close, if you recall, we had to close Settlers Road just to get a small drill rig in to do our geotechnical investigation. When it comes time to do the permanent, the restoration, in all likelihood, and we'll continue searching, but I haven't yet seen a way or thought through a way that we could maintain traffic through that site while we reconstruct the bridge and the abutments. Mm-hmm. So it will be closed for a period of time, and I can't tell you what that period of time is yet. So it is a very complex and difficult site to do anything, let alone repair and restore a heritage structure of the nature of the Thomas James Bridge.
Yeah, okay. And the last thing I think I'd like to make reference to, and sorry to hold court for probably 2 questions too long, but the last thing I'd like to make reference to is you talked about the most efficient, effective communication is SMS. Well, we would love Telstra connectivity most of the time in the valley. That would be great.
Yep, it's that was a big issue for us in the local emergency operations centre, and I've got staff on the call tonight who are just listening in for just for their own situational awareness. We pushed really hard for the telcos to take this seriously. Unfortunately, they didn't in many respects, and it's not just the Macdonald Valley, but the Colo and other parts of the city as well. And it's an issue that we are very mindful of. And that's why we've gone for the two-pronged attach of email and SMS, because email generally relies on data, which I'm told in my own experience isn't too bad up through the Macdonald Valley, up to Sun Albans at least. But also being mindful that as people start to move on with their lives and they're, whether it's dropping kids off at school or attending appointments or workplace or whatever the case is, if they're outside of the valley, hopefully they are in somewhere with reasonable service, and they'll get those SMS notifications and can make plans accordingly.
Okay, just a point. Thanks. Sorry to hold the court for 3 questions.
No worries. Thanks, Carl.
Thanks, Carl. Next question from Chris.
Yes, good evening, and thank you for holding this meeting. I'm also concerned about the continuity of power into the valley, and one of the issues that was raised by Energy Australia, and I'm not sure that you can actually answer this, is that with the landslide between Thomas James and Wiseman's Ferry, they can't get a truck in there to restore the 11 kVA power linkage. And I understand that that's outside of your local government area, but is the Gosford people able to answer that particular question on when that land slippage will be cleared a bit anyway, so that Endeavour Energy can get a truck in there?
So
I'm happy to answer, Will.
Yep, no, go for it. Thank you.
Technically, we have been working with Endeavour to get them access. From my understanding, they had access, so I'll need to check that.
Well, they do have access in that they were able to get there, but where the land slippage is and you've got the big concrete barriers, there's a concrete telegraph pole that A, was moving, and B, had all the cables ripped off it, and it has 3 transformers on it, and they can't get a truck in there to actually put a lift up to either straighten the pole or secure the pole or reconnect the transformers.
Okay, I'll get onto we've got an Endeavour Energy contact that we can discuss that with.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Sounds like we'll take that one back and perhaps feed that back in our after meeting communications, perhaps. Next question from Kim Brownlee.
Hi, I've actually got a couple of questions.
Sure.
So sorry, I'm going to take a bit of time here. But just following on from Chris's question there, have we got any update on what's happening with that landslide as well? There's been a lot of talk about Thomas James Bridge, but nothing about that landslide.
Steve?
Yep, got Jeanette Williams on the line to give an update on that.
Hi everyone, I'm Jeanette from Central Coast Council. I'm happy to make a bit of a statement about where our council is up to. So hello to everyone. Since the storm event earlier this year, Central Coast Council's been working closely with Hawkesbury Council to assess, monitor, identify, make repairs and restoration at sites which are impacted by these weather events. We've recently engaged GHD, which are consultants also, to carry out geotechnical investigations along a 25-kilometre section of Wiseman's Ferry Road and Settlers Road. The review and investigation for Settlers Road is our #1 priority, and we've conveyed that to our consultants. There's 4 other major landslips along Wisemans Ferry Road, which we're also investigating. Within 4 to 6 weeks, we do hope to have a preliminary report findings from our consultants. And that's expected also to receive additional advice and design information for Settlers Road. Once we get this information, we'll be liaising with Transport regarding appropriate funding for those remediation works. Our goal is to get Settlers Road back to 2 travel lanes as soon as possible, which is currently under that single lane traffic control. We'll communicate any advice we get back once known.
How will you be communicating that? Sorry.
We will probably pass a lot of that in conjunction with Hawkesbury Council, and it seems that they've got a website, so we may very well share that information with them to get to you, to your residents.
Thank you.
No worries.
My next question, sorry, and it may have cut out because my internet isn't great. Welcome to the Valley. You may have touched on it before, but bins for us on Settlers Road, you talked about Walmsley Road with the barges and everything like that, but what about the rest of us that, you know, you've got a 5-ton limit on the bridge, 5-ton limit on near Wrights Creek up there. How are we going to get our bins emptied?
Sorry, Kim, that was I guess laziness with my language on my part. When I refer to Walmsley Road, it's really the entire community between the landslide site outside about, I think it's 1098 Settlers Road and the Thomas James Bridge. So if we can get our trucks or a truck into Walmsley Road, which is the access point, then they do the run up to the landslide, collect bins on the way up and down, do Walmsley Road and head out. And we would do the same if we have to rely on our plan B, which is to use smaller trucks and shuttle bins over several days or however long it takes to get those bins out.
Thank you. Sorry, last question here, and I know you touched on emergency services. As someone who works with the RFS, that's actually a major concern for me, being able to get emergency services into the Walmsley Road areas, as you've mentioned. You said that the emergency services have plans in place. Are you able to elaborate on that? I mean, as you can understand, there are a lot of people in here who, you know, even during the floods, we had a few medi-evacs and, you know, that was difficult enough, let alone without being able to get ambulance or, you know, a fire truck over here. Or I understand that there is the Lower Macdonald Brigade that is here, but, you know, there are people that are sort of either side of that might not be able, either side of the landslip or the Thomas James Bridge. That might not be able to get there. So, you know, they'll have to call in, say, Wiseman's Ferry, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how is that going to work?
So I'm not across the detail. What I do know is in our conversations, and for me, the one that always concerns me is ambulance, because time is generally absolutely critical. In our conversation, well, firstly, with a 5-ton limit and the width constraints at the Thomas James Bridge, the ambulance haven't raised any concern about access. So I'm pretty certain that their ambulances are under 5 ton. But their comment to us was, for anything of any significance, generally as a matter of course, they would normally activate a rotary wing, so a helicopter, and get that moving for any sort of health emergency to do an air evac in any case, because of the distances involved and how far it is to hospital. You know, much the same as where I live up here in the Blue Mountains. For anything serious, there's generally a chopper in the air before the ambulances roll. So I can't talk to the detail, I'm sorry. It's not really something that they've shared with us, and to be honest, I probably wouldn't understand it anyway. But yeah, we've notified them. They're across it in their planning, and they haven't raised any concerns with us.
And what about when you start doing the work for Thomas James Bridge and that area shuts down? I understand that we've got helicopters, but what about you know, potential for police or even fire of the RFS to be able to come through? Because I personally messaged the page and asked about emergency services when those gates were shut, and even escalated that through the RFS and was told that it was expected for them to go all the way around Sun Albans to be able to get here.
Yeah, so particularly when we get to the point of reconstruction, and look, we are going through this at the moment in Greens Road, it's simply becomes a physical impossibility. There's only so much road width. The nature of the work means that we need to essentially deconstruct the abutment, pull it down several meters, do whatever the final geotech solution is, and then rebuild it all. So there physically won't be the access. As we've done with the community in Greens Road, it's simply a matter of ensuring that the emergency services are aware of that and that they've got their contingencies in place to deal with whatever may come up. Sorry.
Thank you for answering my questions.
Pleasure.
Thanks, Kim. Next question from Hilda.
We get access to our house via carriageway off Settlers Road. So there's 3 properties there, just 2 next to us. And there was damage to that carriageway as well. Whose responsibility is the fixing of that carriageway?
So it sounds like, Hilda, that it's a private access off Settlers Road. If that's the case, then the owners or those properties that benefit from that private access are responsible for doing any repairs. Now, wandering off into territory that I'm not overly familiar with, but I believe that there are grants available to do some repairs under the DRFA or other New South Wales government grants. I think, and I've got a colleague on the line from who's in the recovery space. I'm sure we'd be able to get some information as a follow-up email to this on those grants and what's available under them.
Okay, so you want me to send in a request for that?
No. So we'll circulate some information on the grants available after this meeting tomorrow or the next day.
All right, thank you for that.
Thanks, Hilda. David Dodd.
Yes, good evening. Thank you so much for all the information you've given us. It's been very informative. I guess we're hearing a lot about an advanced weather pattern, perhaps in September, and I was just curious about what forward planning may be in place should we get hammered again.
Yes, it's a rumor that's spreading widely. There's nothing. Well, look, I guess the first thing is that the conditions are right for another flood. There's no denying that. There's a reasonable likelihood that we'll go back into La Nina, so we may get another rain event. But what I'd stress, in the hope that it puts some or cools the anxiety levels a little bit, is that if we reflect on the event that we've just had, we needed that East Coast low to move less than 100 kilometres north or south, and we would have been far less impacted. So the notion that there's some sort of an accurate forecast of another flood event is simply a rumor. Having said that, of course, it is a possibility, and we are doing whatever we can, but I'll be honest, there isn't a lot that we can do. We are doing our monitoring of the roads. We have, as you would have seen, we've retarped the abutment to Thomas James Bridge today in an attempt to keep the water out, because it's the water that's doing the damage. I think by now we've got, and we really re-established road access last Monday, and we've I think our crews, and I'm incredibly proud of my people and the lengths that they've gone to, as well as our colleagues in the emergency services, just how much they've done in what is really a very short period of time, whilst dealing with other issues around not just the Hawkesbury LGA, but the Hills, Hornsby, down at Menangle and Camden and those sorts of places. So it's probably not a great level of comfort, I admit, but we are unfortunately getting pretty good at responding to these events. We are developing our understanding and anticipating the needs of the community, I think, a lot better, and not sitting back waiting to be told or to be asked what's needed. I think that's certainly something that I saw of a big difference in the response this time between March and this event was that we were far quicker to anticipate and put in plans to address those needs of our communities, and particularly our remote communities.
Thanks, Will. The only other thing I'd like to say, though, is the RFS guys have been heroes throughout this. Yep.
And SES and the ADF guys, yeah, I actually had the opportunity to head out last Wednesday and spend a day on a crew. I'm in the RFS and got to catch up with some of the Wiseman's Ferry guys and the local SES guys. So yeah, it's probably one of the great things about being Australian, to be honest.
That's big thumbs up from me.
Couldn't agree more. Corinne.
Yeah, hi, how are you going? Thank you for all this information. It's good to have. I've just felt just a little bit distressed now with Will Barton saying that, you know, there's not much we can do for the next storm. I feel that we need to really have a plan in place for a next storm. I think my feeling about how everything happened this time is whilst we are in the middle of the emergency, the system is unbelievable. I mean, honestly, as soon as the storm comes, everybody's, you know, they knock at the door, they ring, they contact, you know, evacuate, do this, do that. The emergency is right there to bring supply to people, and it's wonderful. As soon as the water goes down, it's very slow. Now, you've talked about a lot of things to do now to help with the recovery, which should actually be in place before the storm, the same way as everything's in place before a storm for the emergency period. So, for example, this idea of the barges, which I've raised with different councillors and so on, is something that Sydney should have. We are on a river system. You know, when there's flood, it's usually by the river. And they should be available, and there should be places for the barges to go in all those communities automatically with machineries to do the job. I'm on Walmsley Road, and when I saw the Army and even the Navy was here with little shovels, I felt very sorry for them. There was no wheelbarrows because a lot of them went floating away. And I'm thinking, why is this? We're not a third world country. They should be able to bring equipment by barge. We should have a system in place. The fact that the whole of Sydney is in a river system, as an example, I'm just, giving that we should have more at hand. Also, what I've realized too is there are a lot of locals that still have equipment on hand, but it costs money. I was just talking to a neighbor to run his equipment for maintenance and so on. Why isn't there a system in place that you can log equipment that locals have, and the city council or whoever should pay to have them using it, pay them to use it, or to hire their equipment in the area. So yes, there is a lot we can prepare. There is a lot we can prepare and learn from this. And to me, the issue is not the manpower. The issue is the equipment. And to say, oh, we can't get the equipment by road. Okay, well, you're talking of barge, and you're actually looking now at some places to bring barges, and we need to look way deeper into that. And secondly is, so the roads are not operational. What do they do in a war? What do they do in New Zealand when they have an earthquake? They make bridge on top of the road so it can still be passable in any emergency, and it's done very quickly. And so there are things available we're not a third world country. We send that equipment when we go and help third world country. But when it's us, we're only using manpower, and we're proud of that. We are proud of the manpower, proud how much people are helping, we're proud how much the communities are in it. But we need more, and we need to have a whole system in place. So at the moment, what happened, even to call the army, it goes through 3 different steps. It goes through the council, which goes to state, which goes to federal. It should be in place as soon as it's declared, bang, this is what we need. And we need them to have equipment, you know, and that's where I felt that it made it too slow. It was frustrating to people not to have equipment. And for you to say there's nothing we can do for the next time, I'm thinking, no, please learn from it. You're going in the right direction. You certainly are as soon as there is a road, but we need to have it in place. That's how I'm feeling. That's how a lot of the local are feeling. We've been discussing it. And we need to have the same system in place for after than it is while there is an emergency. And I think that will be, we need it. We need it.
Yep. If I can touch on a couple of things there you mentioned or raised, Corinne, because they are perfectly valid points. And my comment around preparation was in response to the prevailing belief that there's going to be another event in September. For future flooding, we absolutely learn and adapt and incorporate new things. And I think that's, again, one of the reasons why we have, and why the community has performed and responded so incredibly well. For the whole LGA, the number escapes me, but I think in March 2021, I think it was, the SES spoke about doing something in the order of several hundred flood rescues. In March this year, I think the number was under 15 because the community learnt. Yep. And so please don't take my comment as we don't learn from the flood events. My comment about there's not much we can do was really around what can we do to protect our infrastructure against the possibility of a flood in September. So we are certainly doing that. We're developing a resilience plan in council. We've got plans afoot to look at a model for engaging in times of emergency, engaging local contractors in effectively an emergency supplier arrangement.
Good.
Yep. So we've got that on the list to do.
Good. Yeah, that was missing.
Yep.
Good. Wonderful.
Yeah.
I'm smiling.
Good. It does require certain elements which I'm anticipating are going to seem overly bureaucratic and frustrating, but they are necessary around things like work health and safety. But leave that for us to sort out. That's what we're doing. And what else was there? And in terms of the barges and the equipment, that's again, we take those learnings on. A lot of those issues are beyond council though, and they're for the state. And the process from here, just to let you know, is that after an event like this, we have debriefs at our local emergency management level. So that's all of our local emergency controllers, the local SES, RFS, etc. The regional emergency level do the same, and as do the state eventually. So there's a formal process of reviewing how we've done, what we want to continue, what we want to do better next time, and that sort of thing.
Yeah, good. Thank you.
Thanks, Corinne. Carl.
Yes, thanks. In terms of what you just mentioned, Will, left field, the council's obviously doing the majority of the heavy lifting here, whether it be through lobbying or whether it be doing assessing and reviewing and engaging all these services. Now, how can we as a community then help you through that political process? We've got an Australian Defence Force that's got more machinery and can build bridges over countries. They can drop off bloody helicopters in the middle of nowhere. They can, they can do whatever. They've got electricians, plumbers, pumps, you name it. And I don't know about anyone else on this call, but I'm sick and tired of paying my taxes. How come we can't, and how can we help you motivate and rather the council do all this bloody heavy lifting, and appreciate you need to, because that's obviously what you do, but surely there is some greater powers here that have to get off their ass and help out the local council.
Not too sure where to take that one. Look, the machinations of state federal defence are well above my pay grade. I'm not too sure what the answer is there. I mean, I know we've got I think a majority of councillors on the call tonight, and representation from Susan's office, and no doubt other Robin will probably avail herself of this recording at some stage as well. I'm sorry, I'm not too sure how to answer or
to be
help.
honest with you, I didn't actually really expect an answer from you. I guess it was more of a statement posed as a question. But what I would love to see next time round as well, because I think these are quite engaging forums, is how about we get some of these people that are decision makers and are in this position of power, and we hear from them on some of these calls. So you guys just aren't sitting there copying, these type of engagement and deflecting situations there behind the scenes. We know you're pushing uphill as much as you possibly can, yet if the real decision makers aren't on some of these calls and listening, yes, you can send them the recording, yes, you can send them the tape, but realistically, how about they grow some balls and we'll really get them on the call and we'll hear what they've got to say.
We'll take that as a comment. Thank you, Carl.
Thanks, Carl. Your enthusiasm is not lost on us. I can assure you we appreciate it. Lisa.
Hi, this has already been touched on, but I just wanted to get a bit more info. So for those of us lucky enough to actually get mobile service in the valley, is there anything more that can be done to sort of get the telcos to actually ensure services are maintained during emergencies like this? Because both floods this year, the mobile service has gone down right at the peak, basically the worst point of the flood, meaning that people that are relying on that can't even contact 000, can't get updated on what's actually happening with the flood to find out if they're likely to have their house inundated. And I'm assuming that's because the power's cut Wise and Ferry with the increasing rises. But with the limited services that we have here in the valley, any that we have is so relied upon that when you lose it at the worst point of a natural disaster, it's pretty terrifying.
Yeah, and as I said, at the local level, and the same occurred in March. I wasn't here for the March flood last year, but I know in the March flood this year and the July event, everyone at the local level was just short of jumping in the car and driving to wherever they needed to drive to knock on doors to try and get action on this. It's something that we are right across in terms of that critical nature of telecommunications, because everything is now coming out via SMS. The early warnings from the SES, the early warnings from the Bureau, they all come out either SMS or data, and yet we've got this weakness in the system. In terms of what locals can do, I'd suggest participate in the democratic process is probably the best bet, and make and my advice, and I'm stepping way outside my comfort zone here as a civil engineer, is to share your stories, and use whatever voice you have.
Yeah. And I think there are probably councillors on the call. I don't know if Patrick or Mary or somebody, this has been a long-standing challenge that council is incredibly cognizant of, and I think there's been a lot of advocacy done with a lot of levels, and we're starting to see some traction on things like NBN towers, but some of those basic core comms are still a challenge. Patrick, did you want to pipe in on any of that?
Look, I think you probably just said all that I could say there, is that council's very aware of it. And I know that the community is very aware of what council's been doing in that space, and it is a really hard slog to keep pushing for that action, but all we really can do is just keep pushing the federal government in particular, and hope that we get something delivered out of that. We have had some small wins, but obviously it's a lot more to go.
Anything further, Lisa?
Not really. I guess if we're talking about those issues being within federal government, obviously I'm guessing good to contact our federal members and things like that. Would that be the same for things like the I guess Telstra landline services and things like that too, because there is an agreement with Telstra and the government to actually provide to ensure that all households have landline service, and I'm pretty sure there's people in the valley that still don't have services from the bushfires. And like who actually is holding Telstra accountable for that agreement?
Really, really valid point. Such a critical issue as well outlined for how we manage these emergencies. It's a paramount issue for us, Lisa. So certainly take that back. And as we've indicated, I think there's probably an advocacy piece there with the federal government, I'd suggest. Kim.
Hi again. I was just wondering if you're able to send perhaps the people that have registered for this event that the link that you guys had up, the Have Your Say link, just so that we've all got I didn't get to write it down before, so just so we've got a link to be able to register for those SMS, because yeah, as you know, communication is paramount around here. But I was just wondering on top of that, like if you guys have a contingency plan for when we do, because when we lose power, we lose mobile reception. So that obviously means that we lose mobile. This time around, Telstra completely went down. So that included people not being able to access internet at all. So just wondering if you guys have thought of or are thinking of a contingency plan for communications during those sorts of events where we do lose, mobile reception and internet and everything else along with it.
Yeah, so I'll take the first part of the question and commentary about the link. What we'll do, we've now got, by registering for this session tonight, we've got your email addresses and most of your mobile phone numbers. So what we will do is send out an update probably tomorrow to everybody who's registered today with the link to the YouTube video, and also sharing that link for your friends, your neighbours and relatives and anybody else in the valley for them to register. So none of you explicitly need to register because we've captured your names, but we want to make sure we've got as much reach as possible on this group as well. All right, Kim?
Thank you.
Now, on the contingency comms, you might be the best person to sort of talk through how the EOC sort of manages that little chestnut.
Yeah, so look, certainly in terms of emergency, I think we started to do it well in March, and I think we did it better in July. We supply information through or to the local SES crews when they're doing resupply up and down the river. But I think your question was probably more in terms of in the future, if it's just a lightning strike which takes out a tower, or there's some other reason for a power cut. Look, I'm not too sure, and I think that you guys are probably best placed to tell us how that would work for you. I would imagine that there are potentially a number of options. When I was growing up, I lived in a very similar situation with only power coming in and out, and phone, nothing else. And we had a really good community with the good old telephone tree. Now, back then, the landline was more reliable, but I'm open to hearing from you on ideas for how that contingency would work in the event that there's power lost.
How can we feed that to you in the future if there is something in? I'm guessing there might be something in place. I think the Macdonald Valley Association has started working on something, but it'd just be great to know how we can feed this information into council.
Look, I think I quite enjoy working with those sorts of associations, because it makes life easy for me, where it gives us one or two conduits in, and we don't have to deal with hundreds of voices and try and cut through and get consistency. So I'd be very open to sitting down in a couple of weeks' time with the association, or on some other timeline if if it's going to take longer, for you guys to have that discussion and start to work up a plan, that would probably be the best way forward.
And just in case there's not one of those people on this call, how can they get in contact with you, Will?
They can get in contact with me through council. So council at Hawkesbury. Everyone else seems to have my email address. So it's very simply will.barton@hawkesbury.nsw.everything else. And I might even throw that in there with the email that goes out with following this session. I'll be honest, I'm getting peak email inflow at the moment, so it might take some time, but that's probably the best way.
Thank you.
I've seen the scary red bubble above Will's inbox, so let's not go there. Thanks, Kim. Hilda again.
Yes, please. One question. This was really informative session. Going forward, are we planning monthly sessions like this to give an update on the progress with these projects?
We're certainly more than happy to keep meeting with you. What we would be proposing that we do, so once a week, now we've got your email addresses. What we will do is include you in a broad email group that just alerts you every Thursday morning, Suzanne, that we routinely and really firmly every once a week provide written updates on our website of all of our flood-related infrastructure recovery projects, of which we've been providing updates on the Thomas James Bridge for some months now. So that's what we would do. What we would like to do then is when there are critical stages in some of these projects, that's the point at which we would be absolutely more than pleased to come back and meet with you to kind of keep you in the loop on those particular milestones. And indeed, when we want your feedback on things. So we've been working with a couple of other communities, and it's been incredibly valuable for us to hear as we start to manage some of the complexities around access and particular needs that communities might face when we are having issues around roads being cut off and access limited, that we can hear from you about what your priorities are and what your preferences are. So Hilda, I would definitely suggest that we'll be back to talk to you in another forum like this. It's just about what that timing is going to be, and I'll be largely driven off Will and his project team around when those next milestones will be.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Hilda. Darren Stapleton.
Yeah, good evening. Look, I think most things have sort of been covered that I was originally going to ask, but one thing that does concern me is with the Thomas Cook Bridge, with the work that is going to go on there, and you said it will go on for quite a while, will we still have pedestrian access to get through there and back down to the ferry?
Excellent question. That will really depend on a lot of detail that's yet to be determined. So that will depend on the construction methodology by the individual contractor when we get to the point of looking at tenders. I mean, one of the things that we'll be putting in as requirements that contractors must meet is to preserve both vehicle and pedestrian access for as long as possible. When we put out tenders and we assess tenders, we don't just look at the price, we also look at their methodology and how they do things. And given the critical nature of access that the Thomas James Bridge performs for this community, that will be one of the things that we look at really in a lot of detail, is how they're proposing to build whatever it is that we end up designing, and minimizing the impact. So pedestrian access, we'll take that on notice as something that we'll certainly try to preserve throughout. But I can't answer in any sort of detail or with any sort of certainty at this point in time.
Rightio. So just adding to that as well, even taking it a step further for motorbike access to get through there. Because I mean, a lot of us still have to get to work and back, and a lot of us probably do travel a little bit of a distance and then go via St Albans and back around. is not a real good option for many, many people, particularly people that do work in Wisemans or very close to Wisemans. So is that something you could consider as well?
Yeah,
So
look,
not
certainly.
only pedestrians, but motorcycles to go through there?
Yeah, yep. I mean, there's a few things that we have to consider. The bridge is one aspect, and the abutments. We also have to consider the risk of further landslides and material coming down. And wouldn't matter what you're on or what you're in. If that happens, the game's over. But no, I'll take that back to the team and see if we can't work up something that keeps us that access for longer for smaller, lighter, down to individuals on foot.
Yeah, fantastic. That's all I wanted, just as long as it was something that was considered.
Yeah. No,
Right,
thank you.
thank
I appreciate that. Tony, good evening.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
We can.
I've got very bad internet connection. If need be, I'm also on the phone. I can unmute my phone if it disappears. First of all, I'd like to thank all the people involved in organising this tonight. It's been really a useful sharing of information. So thanks, Council and everyone involved. I'd just like to make one comment in relation to what the MVA has started to do in relation to the network. It's very much at its formative level at this stage, but there are quite a number of radios that have been distributed, and it seems to me that there needs to be more of those delivered in the lower Macdonald area and the Walmsley Road area, and so that's something that I'll take to the MVA group that's working on this. Because that hopefully, when it gets developed, it will allow a communication system within the valley at least, and there may well be 1 or 2 points within the valley that have external communications during times when most of the communications are down. For instance, when people who have Starlink couldn't quite often have mobile phone and internet connection when the others have gone. But I'll take that back to the group, the MVA group that are working on it. The other concern that I have is in relation to the... Have you still got me?
Mm-hmm.
Thanks.
We can hear you, Tony.
It's cutting out at my end. Is the communications with Central Coast Council, Jeanette, would be really useful if we can have a direct line of communication with a point in Central Coast Council, as well as going through the Hawkesbury Council to share information and to obtain the latest detail. And so
yes, Tony, I take that on board, and Elizabeth, you're welcome to use me as a contact for the time being.
And the details as to what's happening in relation to the road slip from the bridge down to the ferry.
Yes, and as soon as our geotech consultant gets back to us, we'll share some information with you.
Thank you very much.
No worries.
Thanks, Tony. There are some also on that topic of those comms, there are some really good grant opportunities out at the moment with that Resilience have been promoting for around, they're really trying to build, it's like a community-led ground up type of a grants process as well. So it might be worthwhile looking into some of those grant programs as well for that type of program. Councillor Sheetha, good evening. Oh, you're on mute, Les. Les, you're on mute.
How's that?
Better.
Yeah, thanks, Liz. Hi, everybody. Just in relation to the towers, I know some people have got property on their towers, so they might be listening to the comments that have been made and requested of them. Because I know there's 2 towers I know where they tried to get both generators and fuel into, but they left the run too late. there was no access there. So I don't know about the others, but so they might be listening, and I'm sure Will's further expressions to them might encourage that to look at how they might have something more permanently there, because like it's not just a flood out. We can have fires that can put the towers out, or even a tree fall and put the power out. So it needs to be something more permanent for sure. But I know that Will's on top of it. And yeah, thanks everybody for their input tonight, by the way.
Thanks, Les. So any further questions or comments? If not, I'm going to just ask my Superstar Manager of Community Planning and Partnerships, Megan Ang, to do a quick little promo for the recovery centres, if she's there.
Yeah, I am. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, fantastic. Look, thanks very much for the opportunity to hear from everybody directly tonight. It's yeah, really important for me and my team to hear directly from the community what are their most pressing issues. My branch actually contains all of the recovery team, who I imagine some of you in the community would be aware of, which is Liz Murphy and her other recovery workers. They've been instrumental in working with Resilience New South Wales to actually set up the recovery centre, which has been operating out of Wiseman's Ferry at the retreat for a couple of weeks now. Look, I appreciate that it's still a little bit of a distance for a lot of you to drive, and obviously with respect to the items that were discussed tonight. But just really wanted to encourage everybody to go and attend. It serves as a one-stop shop, and essentially will provide access to Services Australia, Services New South Wales, representation from Hills, Central Coast and Hawkesbury City Council, as well as other critical agencies such as DPI, Local Land Services. There are also mental health services there, as well as Salvation Army and Anglicare, who are offering a range of financial and immediate relief services. In addition to the Recovery Centre at Wiseman's, we are intending to host mobile recovery pop-ups as well. And if you subscribe to the information via the link that was shared tonight, we'll be able to keep you into loop as to when you can expect our recovery team to be out in those more isolated areas. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Megan. Appreciate that. One last hand has popped up on an iPhone, unnamed.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My
Who have we got?
Danny. I live along Settlers Road.
Welcome, Danny.
My question regards livestock and getting feed to livestock in this area. With the bridge only having a 5-ton limit and Settlers Road having the road obviously closed. Once the road's fixed, that bridge will be then closed, and then other companies will have to try and go the long way to get to properties here for feed and everything like that. And I just don't see that happening. Have we got some sort of plan in place to get feed to us out here?
Look, Danny, I'm going to go out on a limb and presume that this is down the track when we're into full swing construction and so forth, rather than this immediate emergency situation we're in at the moment, where LLS and SES were, well, up until last week, doing fodder drops. It's not necessarily something that we have turned our mind to, because we again, we're not at that stage where we really understand the nature or the details around what sort of a closure is going to be required. But we've got it on the radar now, and that's something that we'll certainly consider and probably come back to the community on. As Liz said, it'll be one of those milestones. Once we know and have an appreciation of what the journey to the reconstruction looks like, that's where then I'd imagine we'd start to come back and ask some of these questions around. And similar to the communication, is work with you guys rather than tell you how it's going to be. We'll work with you to develop a solution. If however I'm wrong and you're referring to the short term, then certainly we can continue to develop. We can work with the SES on airdropping fodder, as they were doing last week.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jenny. Well, it sounds like if there's no further questions, I think we might draw the meeting to a close. Once again, my sincerest thanks for all of you. Rest assured, Council is incredibly aware of the challenges that this community has been facing, and I guess our message is we're here to help you, and we're in it with you. So tomorrow we will send out an email providing some critical links and a recording of this that you are welcome to share on to those members of your community who have been unable to join us this evening. So once again, my sincerest thanks, and have a lovely evening. Thank you very much.